Welcome back to PlayStation Access and our top 10 videos, helping point you towards the greatest games on PS5. This time, it's the punchiest of our lists, the very best action games on PlayStation 5, offering slick combat systems, adrenaline-surging set pieces, and a cast-iron guarantee that you will see a whole load of dudes get smacked in the face. As always, these games are released with a PS5 version. You can also play the best PS4 games via backwards compatibility, and we have a separate list for those in the description below. But for now, let the face punching begin. In no particular order, we kick off with Helldivers 2. Heard of it? It's the co-op sensation of 2024, smashing into our free time with the ferocity of a 10-ton Hellpod. As a fresh-faced Helldivers recruit, you are meat for the grinder in Super Earth's forever war against the insectoid Terminids and the Automatons, a terrifying Terminator tribute act. This conflict is a collision of simple pleasures and big ideas. On one hand, there's the minute-to-minute satisfaction of mulching bugs on bots, raining down spectacular fury with aerial stratagems, and occasionally liquefying your teammates with the, same stratagems. Don't sweat it, you're just a reinforcement pod away from shrugging it off and continuing the mayhem. But zoom out from the nuts and bolts, and developers Arrowhead are pulling off a much grander coup. An ongoing campaign that responds to the victories of the collective community, capturing the push and pull of a war on dual fronts and promising that no 2 weeks of Helldivers 2 are ever quite the same. It feels like next-gen storytelling delivered with explosive glee. Next up, Returnal. One of the earliest PS5 games and still one of the boldest. A quirky synthesis of shooter, roguelike, platformer, and narrative-driven mystery. You crash on Atropos, a distant world in the grip of a time loop. Every death zaps you back to your ship and recalibrates the alien architecture, starting your run to freedom afresh. And die you will. Alien fauna stalk you through trap-filled dungeons, and bullets come so thick and fast that often the world vanishes behind a sea of blobby projectiles. And that's before you reach the showstopper boss encounters. As you die and try again, you'll gradually unlock permanent traversal upgrades and trades for your punchy weaponry. But what really keeps you alive isn't earned, but learned. The muscle memory and reflexes to dance through once impossible defenses, and the knowledge to turn Atropos' alien technologies to your advantage. And once you've made that journey of personal discovery, you can enjoy the whole campaign with a friend in online co-op. Masterful stuff. Sticking with looping mastery, we head to Sifu, which swaps the guns for fists of fury and the occasional metal pipe. No, you're not an angry plumber out to collect a delayed invoice, but the child of a murdered kung fu master. 4 gangsters stand between you and the villain responsible, which is a perfectly sized gauntlet to get to grip with parries, dodges, and environmental takedowns as you John Wick through rooms of thugs. In motion, Sifu plays like an evolutionary step of Batman's Arkham combat, with its focus on crowd control and counters, but with an additional structural gauge that opens your opponents up for lightning-quick slaps. Allow your glass jaw to get cracked, however, and instead of dying, you return to fray aged by a few years. It gives you the length of a human lifespan to finish your mission, complete with shifting stats as you morph from inexperienced but rubber-boned youth to the brittle power of an aging master. And if that sounds too clever for you, you also get to relive that bit in Old Boy where you furiously purge a corridor of all human life. Next up, Stellar Blade. Or what happens when you take the stylish character action of Bayonetta, mix in Souls-like exploration, and wrap it up in a ribbon of oddness straight out of Nier Automata. A stew of influences to be sure, but the result is a wonderfully layered fighting experience that builds careful parries and dodges towards show-stopping QTE takedowns. Stellar Blade is set on a future Earth, where the leftovers of humanity hide from freakish monsters, while powerful warrior ladies rain down from space to tidy the whole mess up. They're not unlike Helldivers, but with better dress sense and much less blasé about human life. Progress is careful and deliberate as you excavate upgrades from humanity's forgotten tombs, gradually unlocking latent abilities until you're tooled up for some of the most spectacular boss fights of this generation. Much like the collectible fizzy drinks you collect throughout the game, Stellar Blade is a highly gluggable sugar rush. Resident Evil 4 has an unfair advantage over other action games, given that it's a remake of what was already one of the greatest action games of all time, but this is no lazy legacy inclusion. Capcom's 2023 reworking earns its top 10 place with a stunning visual makeover, smart reworkings of several key sequences, and some under-the-hood tinkering that ups the urgency. Just the simple ability to shoot while moving and parry with the knife lets enemies throw much more at you. Reach the opening village siege, and the momentum of the cultist onslaught lets you know that this is not your father's Resident Evil 4. You'll feel a knot in the pit of your stomach, and if you don't get your act together, you'll feel a chainsaw in the pit of your stomach too. So begins your run of Hall of Fame set pieces. The Lake, El Gigante, the House Siege, Garradors, the Minecart, Regenerators. We'll be here all day if we keep it up. Almost 20 years later, Resident Evil 4 still has the power to thrill. Neo 1 and Neo 2 have been action favourites of ours on PS4 and PS5, so it was no surprise that Team Ninja's next action RPG was right up our bloodstained street. Rise of the Ronin is bigger in scope than those previous games, with miles of Edo-era Japan to liberate, but put aside the cat collecting and aerial sightseeing, and what remains is a lethal love letter to the clash of steel on steel. This plays like a hybrid of Neo and Sekiro, with a deflective counterspark move putting parrying at the heart of dueling, while still encouraging deep character customization with heaps of loot. Different weapons unlock different movesets, stats and abilities are shaped by leveling and the gear you equip, and a stance system lets our wandering Ronin adjust to any incoming attack. Sure, there's also rich stealth to master if you'd rather skulk in the shadows, but when coolly chopping down frenzied attackers feels as good as this, you'll be forgiven for seizing your hilt and stepping into the light. If you told us 5 years ago that Final Fantasy would one day qualify for an action game list, we'd have waited patiently for our ATB bar to fill and then used our turn laughing uproariously at the notion. And yet, here we are, having hack and slashed through 80 hours of furious revenge as Clive Rosfield in Final Fantasy XVI. Here is a guy who has suffered too much to engage in the polite waiting of turn-based battling. With his family destroyed through some Game of Thrones-style machinations, Clive slices his way across fractured kingdoms, amassing the elemental power of the icons. These godlike beings not only punctuate the story with hardware-flexing boss encounters, but imbue him with all new fighting styles to endlessly combine into stylish combos. Square Enix even brought Devil May Cry 5 battle designer Ryota Suzuki on board to ensure the weapons hit as hard as the story. With plenty of accessibility options to ease traditional RPG fans into the brawling, this is the perfect gateway drug to the hack-and-slash genre. Once you've got a taste for expressive combat systems, it's time to feast on Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition. Before Ryota Suzuki cooked up Clive, he gave us 3 characters in one game. Dante needs no introduction, a peacocking pugilist as comfortable with swords and guns as he is a weaponized motorbike. Then you've got Nero, whose robot arm can drill into demons, slow time, or detach entirely and be ridden like a rocket-fueled surfboard. And finally there's V, who summons a trio of demons to fight on his behalf. Oh, and in this PS5 Special Edition, Virgil also joins in the fun, with a concentration gauge that rewards cocky risk-taking, thick last-second evasions, and plenty of smug taunting. Shifting between the 4 feels like edging up through chili tears on a curry menu. From Milky V, conducting fights from a distance, to a red-hot Virgil daring you to live dangerously and max out the Scoville scale. What unites them is a shared philosophy of fighting beautifully, striving for that smokin' sexy star ranking. When you mix up your combos and finally achieve it, few games feel better. More Capcom next, as the Devil May Cry 5 team swap Dante for Drakes in Dragon's Dogma 2. Far from the stoic stuffiness of most fantasy RPGs, this is LARPing with thumping arcade attitude. You pull giant trolls and griffins into the bruising brawls, battering them with special attacks before leaping on their backs, clambering up their fur, and poking them in the eye. Imagine the majestic shadow of the Colossus, only with the demented slapstick of an itchy and scratchy cartoon. Making it even more hectic is the involvement of 3 AI sidekicks, 1 made by you, 2 pulled from the online community, letting you adventure with celebrity lookalikes and famous video game mascots. Ever dream of slaying a Cyclops alongside an off-brand Sonic the Hedgehog? Be ever so careful what you wish for. With 10 classes to master, 2 kingdoms to save, and an infinite supply of AI freaks to recruit, Dragon's Dogma 2 is an endless anecdote generator for any would-be adventurer. If we've learned anything from Kratos, it's that disrespecting the gods rarely ends well. So of course, God of War Ragnarok makes the list. 3 legendary weapons power this rampage through the 9 realms. The frosty thwacks of the Leviathan Axe, the magma fury of the Blades of Chaos, or the Draupnir Spear, if you fancy serving up the gods like cheese and pineapple on a cocktail stick. Of course, there's precious little cheese in this powerful story of strained parent and child relationships, not just in Kratos and Atreus, but throughout the godly realms. The way Santa Monica shifts gears between heart-wrenching dilemmas and limb-tearing battles has to be seen to be believed. There's as much depth to build customization and fighting styles as there is the turmoil in the characters' hearts. Why not tear out those hearts and squeeze some calm into them? It may be the end of the world as we know it, but we feel fine. A couple of honourable mentions before we wrap up. If you prefer your swords laser-flavoured, Star Wars Jedi Survivor delivers the best virtual lightsaber yet, with 5 fighting styles and a galaxy of iconic beasts to lop up. We also love Like a Dragon Gaiden, the man who erased his name, a side story that fills in what Kazuma Kiryu was doing in the time leading up to Infinite Wealth. Spoiler alert, he was kicking loads of people in the head, and using spy gadgets too in this hugely fun spin-off. And finally, a nod to Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, a game with a Metroidvania structure that harks back to the Prince's 2D roots, but is livened up with acrobatic combat and boss encounters bursting with anime flourishes. Do not sleep on one of 2024's best games. And that is quite enough bone-breaking and face-punching for me. Of course, if we've missed your favourite PS5 action game, share your love for it in the comments. And if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and check out our other PS5 top 10 lists. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.
PlayStation